Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Holden. Welcome back to the No Holding Back podcast, episode 10. We've been doing this for a while now, 10 episodes.
Yeah, we're turning and burning, man. We're having fun with this, doing them on the audio side, doing them on the video side, on YouTube. And, we're having a lot of fun, get some great guests. And we've got a great guest coming up today, head coach of the Denver Pioneers and men's lacrosse, Bill Tierney. 7 national titles he's won. 6 came, of course, at Princeton. He won 1 at Denver in 2015. He's had 5 teams in 10 years go to the final weekend in college lacrosse. He is a true legend of the game, and we're looking forward to getting to him here in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, definitely. Really excited to talk to him, being someone who's played lacrosse for a while and a big fan of sport, obviously. And in some other lacrosse news, the Premier Lacrosse League is doing a cheese ball toss championship.
What? Are they using sticks?
I don't know. It might just be
use that pole back there.
Catapulted almost. I think that's probably going to be a little bit more entertaining than ESPN sports competition right now.
I was not impressed with that. It's
pretty underwhelming. I got an alert.
Good way to put it.
Got an alert yesterday from ESPN. Saying here's more information about WNBA star who knocked out. I believe it was Chris Paul. I don't remember her name, which is kind of bad of me, but. I think it'll be more exciting. And one of our guests that we're having on Monday, Trevor Baptiste, participating.
Yeah.
So, that's really all I have for anything new at the moment. Anything you got?
Well, no, I'll just say this in regards to Trevor. I mean, all-time wins leader in face-offs and in college lacrosse. I mean, is he going to be down there taking draws with a cheese ball? How's this going to work?
Yeah, he could be, doing the clamp and plunger move and then popping it up. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be like a game of cup pong, but with cheese balls instead, or how this is going to work. But
you know what? There have been many things that I would say, have been of the positive.
Yeah.
Although the times we're living in, I'm a positive person by nature, and there are a lot of positive things. There's a lot of obscure things, like cheese ball tossing and those things. So definitely. We've seen a time. We had cherry pit spitting on a couple of weeks ago. It's just it never seems to end. So we're excited though, as Luke said. And without further ado, let's get to our Zoom camera and bring in the head coach of the Denver Pioneers, Bill Tierney. Joined now by the head coach of the Denver Pioneers from Denver, Colorado, Bill Tierney. Bill, good morning. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Ben. Thanks. Watching one of our April snowstorms from yesterday melt out there, and we'll have another beautiful day in Denver.
Yeah, we have here in Southeast Michigan. I'm looking out the window here outside the studio. We've got kind of your weather going on here. It's going to be 55 tomorrow, so big fan of that. But it's really good to talk to you. And obviously, you guys didn't really get going this season. You played 6 games. You got out to a 4-2 start. Can you take us back to the moment when you found out that everything was a done deal and there was no more season?
Yeah, obviously with our 2-hour time difference from the East Coast, we got some information. We were actually out at practice, and I got a text from my boss that said we have, we had heard some of this stuff going on, but weren't really considering. We were getting ready for our game with Ohio State. But because of the time difference, we were out on the field for practice, and Carlton Creech, our AD, sent all of us a note saying mandatory meeting tomorrow at 9. And, we kind of had an idea something was up. So I texted him real quickly. I said, are we through? And he said, where are you? And I said, I'm out on the field. So he came running out and talked to me a little bit. We felt like that wouldn't be a good time to break this to the team, but but they had a general idea. Then by the next day, we had another practice planned for 3:00, and by then we knew that everything was going to be shut down. So we changed our practice from kind of our last prep practice for Ohio State to, like a lot of people did, to trying to have fun, intra-squad game, talk to the team beforehand, explain to them what was going on, that basically, things were shutting down, and we weren't going to be going to Ohio State, and we probably weren't going to be playing anymore. And the interesting thing that happened with our group, and I'm sure it happened with others, was that when they were playing, we just chose up sides. Then when they were playing, they were great. They were having fun and really enjoying each other. I think that getting ready for the game was kind of lifted from them. So it was a lot of fun. But then when we finished, kind of brought them in like we normally do. And they wouldn't leave the field. They just refused to leave the field. And, you know, I started watching them in groups. I wasn't going to go anywhere. We had nothing to do. And, you know, some of the groups, some of the guys just took the balls and started shooting at the goal. And others took their stuff off. Others were hugging. Others were crying. And it was really an emotional time because, you know, I got 52 guys and I'm supposed to be their leader. And I'm sitting there wondering what to do. And then quickly you got to gather up and get them all together. And finally got them off the field. And we met the next day and which culminated everything, and then told them, start thinking about getting stuff out of the room. You know, at the University of Denver, we have a unique academic schedule. We have what they call a quarter system. For us, it's a trimester. So we weren't even done with our second trimester yet. The kids had to go into finals that next week. And so since then, we've started our spring semester. And the guys, like everywhere else, the guys are doing a great job with the online teaching and everything. But it was an emotional time. You know, I'm sure you talked to a lot of coaches. Every coach said, we thought we were turning a corner with us, with our young defense, and with us with our freshman goalie and stuff. So we thought we were getting there, and had a great win over Notre Dame, and thought we played really well. And you know, but this is different than anything, and you've heard this 1,000 times. This is bigger than us, bigger than lacrosse, and it's just something that we had no choice but to agree with it and do our best to do our part of the job.
And, you know, how do you think, with everything that's going on with the current pandemic, the season getting cut short, how do you think that your program and other programs around the country are going to kind of move on from this and you know, work into next year and kind of stay on track?
Well, it's a great question. Number one for us is we think we've done a pretty good job of staying in touch with our guys. As I said, we're 5 weeks in now. We've had 4 Zoom calls with the team. Every Monday we talk with them. Last week, the coaches did individual meetings with the guys. So that, you know, 52 guys, that's a lot of time. I think they appreciated that. We kind of give them, for our Monday calls, we give them a small chapter to read. Right now we're using the book Mind Gym, which is a great motivational book, good thinking book, but it's got really short chapters, which makes me happy. You know, and then they kind of get into some discussions with them. Our administrators have done a great job of staying in touch with us. So with that in mind, you know, we feel good about that. You know, that and then 2 classes of recruits. We've been on the phones a lot and Zooming a lot, but it's actually given us time to step back and do some things with our players that, you know, right now we'd be preparing for Providence, or we'd probably be in Providence right now.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that part has been really good. I think the NCAA's decision is going to have a ripple effect for years to come. And right now it's, we talk about the peak of the virus. We're talking about the peak of the madness in Division I lacrosse because of the transfer portal and kids who now have that extra year. Some of those Ivy kids who can't go back to their school are out looking. It's amazing how many really, really good young players, or older players as far as college goes, are out there on the portal. Right now there's over 500 lacrosse players on the transfer portal. And with the NCAA's rule giving everybody an extra year, this ripple effect is going to go on for the next 4 years. Now, I do think that as the years go on, there'll be less and less kids who want to take advantage of that 5th year, but they might, because back in, let's say 2 years from now, anybody that wants to do a 5th year, his athletic scholarship money's got to come from within the 12.6 that you're giving your whole team. You might see everybody culling back on the number of recruits they're looking for their freshman classes, because everybody's going to be looking ahead. Well, you know, who's going to, you know, what first team All-American at so-and-so university 2 years from now is going to be looking for a grad program? You know, let's hold on for him, or you know, so it's really changing the landscape of what we're trying to do. I feel bad for some of these kids because they, you know, they're writing to us and there's a lot of them, and grad school is a challenge. We've got to get them into it. We've got to make choices. It's expensive in some cases, and a lot of schools didn't save any money because nobody knew this was going to happen. So
right.
This thing has so many tentacles out there, and it's going to affect all of us. But in some cases, it'll certainly make 2021 an exciting year, and it's going to be tough on those broadcasters who thought they were talking about a guy who was at this school and now he's playing against them.
Well, Bill Tierney is our guest here on No Holding Back, head coach of Denver, 7 national championships to his credit in his illustrious coaching career, one at Denver in 2015. And Bill, speaking of grad transfers, I remember the one that I've done a lot of your games, but obviously not a ton of your games over the years. The tournament and those things we've done every year. Matt Neufeld was a guy that was one of those transfers. Was Matt the first one you went that route at Denver with?
Actually, it's really interesting. My first year at Denver, we had a young man named Nick Gradinger. Nick was a Cornell grad, and he had 1 year left because he had an injury. And the funny thing is, so he left Cornell, I left Princeton, and when we had played at Cornell that year, Nick and I didn't get along real well. And so it was funny, but he wanted to come. And I'll tell you, it was really interesting because the Cornell defensive style they were playing was very similar to ours at Princeton. So Nick came in. It was less of a change for him on the field than really it was for the Denver guys who played a totally different style defense than I wanted to play. And so Nick came in and he was a great help to us. He really did a great job. The guys loved him. The hardest part about this 5th year thing, it's not about the players. You're not going to take one who can't play. Obviously, right. Matt Neufeld was fabulous for us. He was participating in 3 Final Fours, won a national championship, and we had recruited Matt. In fact, it came down to us in Maryland, and he chose Maryland, which was fine. He did great. But I think Matt would tell you that he had an amazing experience at Denver in his 1 year. The key to all these guys is, and this is where I think everybody's should keep an eye out, is how does bringing in 2, 3, 4, 5 of these guys from all these different schools for 1 year change the culture of your program? Our locker room is a great place right now. We got amazing kids that buy into our culture, buy into our coaching style. And you've seen my act. I'm not the easiest guy to play for. And these guys are all in. We've got to be very, very, very careful if we bring in 1 or 2 of these guys that they understand. They're just part of a small part of a culture. We're bringing them in to help us win, obviously, but also we don't want to upset the apple cart when it comes to, we got 15 recruits coming in. We've got hopefully 4 or 5 seniors coming back. It's going to be a crowded locker room already. And then all of a sudden you bring in a few more. They better darn well be like Matt Neufeld and just come in, lay low, do your job on the field, and then slowly gain the respect from your teammates so that by the end, like Matt, he was one of our favorite players and one of the favorites of the teammates as well.
Yeah.
And, just to touch on kind of those grad transfers, how hard is it really to get certain guys, to buy in and get into the program? They're only there for a year. How hard does that make it for you and your coaching staff?
Well, the bad news, I guess you'd call it, is you got to be very frank with them up front. And if you're not, you're asking for trouble. You got to explain to them how you do business. You got to explain to them that in our case, we travel 30,000 miles a year. You're going to be on planes. You got to learn how to study in airports. You're going to wear a jacket and tie. You're going to have a haircut. You're not going to have facial hair. Excuse me. And if they wince at any of that stuff, sorry, we're not for you. And then the other part of it is understanding that we do things in a developmental way, and we want to make sure that it's got to be team first. Now, it's kind of, we're kind of hypocritical in that who are the guys we're looking at from this 5th year are guys that can score goals or stop goals, right? And so, trying to pull them into the system. But I think you gain that from your interview with the guys. I think, in talking to them. Right now, when we try to get a 50-year guy, we're going on virtual tours of our campus because we're not allowed to actively recruit. The good news of all this is these guys are not 16 years old. They're 22 years old. And so you have a whole different maturity level. If a young man, some of the guys we're talking to are guys we talked to when they were 16. In fact, this group was the last group that was in that young recruiting group, that the guys that we were recruiting in 9th grade, for God's sakes,
Wow.
they're 14, 15 years old. Now all of us, and so back then, if you asked them to point out Denver on a map, they probably couldn't do it. And now they look at Denver as, wow, what a cool place to go to, even if it's just for a year. I reach out of my comfort zone and see what this is like. They've always been intrigued by our program or played against us. They've heard about Matt Brown and his offense and stuff like that. So, and they know what a good group of guys, because that the lacrosse world is small and everybody kind of knows everybody or has met everybody. So they talk to each other. And so we whittle it down that way. And then, of course, academically, we've got some great grad programs and things like that. So you've got to figure out if that works. And then was that in their plan originally to go to grad school right after undergrad? A lot of guys are pretty tired of school after 4 years and will reluctantly now jump in for MBAs and things like that. My younger son, Brendan, got his MBA from Duke at 24 years old. He had 2 years of a job after Princeton and then went to Duke. And, everybody else is 8-9 years older than you. And so he was a popular figure when they picking people for their ultimate Frisbee teams. But he had no experience when it came to the things they discussed in the business world. So it's a really intricate thing. The key, as I said before, is really to get the right guy who just wants to enjoy the game so much, be taught a little bit more, and be with a group of great guys.
Yeah, no doubt. Bill Tierney, our guest here on No Holden Back, talking lacrosse, talking a whole bunch of different things. Curious, you mentioned some of the things you're doing, Bill, with your staff, and you're having meetings and stuff like that with the players. What other kind of things are you doing personally to fill such a huge void at this time of the year in your life?
It's amazing how the days get filled, Ben. It's we have a Zoom meeting every morning with my staff, and that whether we have something really serious like these recruits to talk about or our players to talk about, we break up for the three of us. We break up our team. We touch base with a player not only on our team Zoom, but at least one of us every week with one of our players, and then all the recruits. So you're talking about 50 players, 30 recruits for or 20, 25 recruits for the next 2 years. You're talking about 75 kids that you've got to stay in touch with. We've got our administrators above us making us be on things, which is great because staying in touch with them, you're always getting feedback. And then every night I sit down with my wife and watch Ozark and get my butt kicked in Scrabble. So it's I'm down 14 games to 5 right now, and I don't think it's getting any better. But it's amazing how fast they go, and we all want to be out there. We take a walk every day. I do my probably 3-mile walk, every day, and that's been interesting because I've never done that before, and it's been great. And so, it's amazing what you start to realize is how much time you've wasted when you weren't locked in, and so there's enough to do, believe me.
Yeah, I can attest because, this young man's a college freshman now at Central Michigan, journalism major. And the first couple of weeks for me, it wasn't too bad. When I was done the end of February, last thing I did was a hockey game. The first lacrosse game I was supposed to do was your game at Villanova, I believe on April the 4th. And after about 3 weeks, I was climbing the walls, and he's like, "Dad, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this?" And now I got a studio in my living room, and I get to sit next to my son. You know what that's like, working with your family and your sons and daughters, right?
There's nothing like like sharing these kinds of experiences with your family. And I go through this with young coaches a lot. You know, I think we have a lot of young coaches in our game that are, and our game has exploded because of the quality and professionalism of our young coaches and their energy and recruiting and all that stuff. But, you know, oftentimes I tell them that, you know, don't be one of these guys who turns 60 years old and looks back and your son is 20, 30 years old and you've never spent time with them, or your daughter for that matter.
Yep.
So I've been blessed. I always tell the story about John Hess in 1997, who was one of our great attackmen of Hubbard, Hess, and Massey. They won 3 national championships. And he knew me so well that one day I walked on the field at Princeton and he said, what's the matter with you? And I said, what are you talking about? What's the matter with me? And he says, nothing the matter with me. You know, go start practicing. He said, he knew me so well. And he said, so finally he got out of me that my sons Trevor and Brendan were playing in the state prep championship game in New Jersey that afternoon. He said, and he said something I'll never forget to me. He said, number one, you got to go be with your sons. And number two, if you think that we need you here in practice, you're out of your mind. And it really, it just, in one way, it was a staggering punch in the face that my team didn't need me. Mm-hmm. But in another way, a 20-year-old young man was telling me, who at the time was probably, you know, 97. So I was 47 years old, and telling me giving me a lesson in life. And I'll always remember that. And I always watch some of these guys. They're so obsessed with their job, so obsessed with the coaching. They all make up new words and new vernacular and watch film of every guy. And that's all good stuff. But number one is never forget your family. It's got to come first.
Love it.
And to touch on some more coaching and coaches, Dave Petramala earlier this week was let go by Johns Hopkins. What's your take on that?
Well, if you know anything about the history of the game, I recruited David to Johns Hopkins when I was the assistant there, and so we are very close. He's like he used to babysit my kids. He's like a son to me. So I believe that he is, as you've seen a lot. There's been a lot written. He and I have spoken a couple of times, and this is a blow to obviously him because he put so much into this thing. But I'll tell you one thing about Dave Petramala. Not only will he land on his feet, but he will be hugely successful. I think for him, and we were just talking about this parenting thing, you know, he's got 2 sons that are sophomores in high school that are both phenomenal lacrosse players. And that's what he's worried about right now. And he'll take care of that business. You know, his passion for Johns Hopkins he's given a lot of his life to it. He talks about 30 years of his life to it. And it's been quite a ride. He's been ultra successful. And the thing that makes me happiest is how well I know him and how hard he works, that he will land on his feet and maybe be better for it. You know, the only difference between my move from Princeton to Denver and his move from Hopkins to wherever he's going is that, you know, I got out, you know, I get out on my own choice, but he's going to do great, and he's doing fine right now. And he's a good man. This is a good man who taught a lot of life lessons to his players. And ultimately that's what we're all about. If you know, I've always said to people, you know, on my gravestone, don't put how many championships I've won, put that I love my players. And that's what guys like Petro are all about.
That's awesome stuff. Thanks for sharing that with us, Bill. And I want to go back. You touched on the story from your days at Princeton in 97. You had a span there where you won 3 in a row. It's probably hard to answer. You had 6 there. Is the first one the sweetest, or how do you put that into perspective, man? You got a half a dozen to pick from there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because each one has a story. You know, the first one, and I said this on an interview yesterday. The first one was the Bad News Bears, man. Like we're playing, you know, a group of kids that was my first recruiting class. I promised them in the first meeting that we would win a national championship. Meanwhile, if I had to bet any amount of money on that, it wouldn't have been more than a dime. But but it happened. And so we get to North Carolina, beat them in the semifinals, and we're playing Syracuse in the championship, and everything folds out right, and we win that thing. So how can you not look at that as like, whoa, that was very special? And then you go to '94, which is 2 years later. We had Kevin Lowe, Scott Batch-Glupo, Scott Reinhardt, all these guys that were just so good that we had turned a corner. Now we weren't the Bad News Bears anymore. And the way I always used to describe it was, was the first one, everybody in the lacrosse world, even Coach Simmons, who to me is one of the most classy and greatest guys that our game was blessed to have him, was happy for us. He came to our tailgate after the game.
Wow.
I mean, what a class guy, right? He was, so everybody said, oh, that's cute. Princeton won. And then we win it in '94, and it's like, ooh, they're pretty good. And then we go '96, '97, and '98, and now everybody hates us.
Right.
They're cheating. They're not really that good. In '97, that year we were undefeated, so that made that one special. '96 we made some goalie changes in the semifinals and finals, so that was kind of crazy. And then '98 we kind of culminates that Hubbard Hess Massey group going out as 3-time national champs. And then the one that pops at you is 3 years later with going back to our family thing, right? We win a national championship against Syracuse in overtime with my two sons on the field, and Trevor in the goal was the first team All-American. So, and then fast forward 14 years later, who knows how that all happens, and it's kind of a redo. We win that first one. It was just like winning the first one at Princeton, except we had a lot more talent in the first one here at Denver than we did in the first one at Princeton. But so it's like when people say to you, we have 4 children, and each one of them thinks they're the favorite. And so we'll never tell them which one's really the favorite, because they're each our favorite at different times. And so it's the same thing with these things. I've been blessed far more than I deserve. I have a great wife and a great family, and I don't know why this has happened, but it's my job now to understand that it's happened and to do my best to help mentor young coaches, to help the game go and hopefully in the right direction. And always reminding myself that you can't do this by yourself. You do it with great players, great assistant coaches, as I've had over the years.
Yeah.
And you do it with a lot of faith. And I've been very open about that. And then a lot. There's always a little luck at the end.
And what kind of influenced your decision to leave Princeton, go out west, and take on Denver as your next challenge in coaching?
Well, it's interesting. Before I went to Princeton, I had only been in any job for 3 years. It was like 3 years I'm out, 3 years I'm out, 3 years I'm out. And I had achieved, actually, when I went to college, I wanted to be my own high school's head football coach. That was my goal in life. And I actually became that. I actually got that job, followed my football coach, Nick Belitzis, who's a great guy, great coach in Levittown. And then that Ray Rostan, who's a longtime head coach at Hampton-Sydney. Ray was my best friend at Cortland, and he was leaving RIT to go to Ithaca, and got this call to go interview up at RIT, and kind of left that, So 3 years at RIT, 3 years at Johns Hopkins as the assistant, and then when I went to Princeton, I thought it'd be 3 more years, and 3 years later, I was offered the Hopkins job, but by then we were kind of we had Batch, we had Lowe, we had these guys, and things were going pretty well. And so thankfully, again, I go back to my wife, Helen, where it's just, we made the decision for our family and turned out to be the right one. Fast forward 22 years and all those great players and all those great memories, and it was time. This job opened. My son Trevor was out here. He lived in Boulder. He had actually coached at DU for a year, but he was out here doing his own thing. He was getting his master's from Harvard in developmental psychology. And then I said, well, he wanted me to take the job. I said, well, if I take it, you got to come coach with me. And so I think what stirred me to do it is sometimes in life we get afraid. Sometimes in life, we like, I like what I'm doing. I'm doing okay. I don't want to take any chances. My take on this was just, I could have stayed at Princeton. We were doing great. I loved the place, but I felt like I was on a little bit of an automatic pilot, and I just felt like I had always before that been a part of programs and building programs, took a chance and made a change. Again, Helen said, let's do it. And we did it. Our kids were older then, so we were all out of college, and just made that move for another challenge. My boss then, Peg Bradley-Doppus, challenged me to get the program where she thought it could be and to help expand the game out west, which I don't know if I've done that or not, but I know that at least we're here. Our Denver Elite program has progressed really well. You've been at our place a couple of times. Yep. It's a great place. And so it was just, it kind of recharged the batteries, so to speak. Yep. And then knowing that I was going to get the support that I needed to travel 8, 9, 10 times from here to out east if we were going to play a challenging schedule and if we were going to be good. And so it just became exciting, intriguing, and kind of got the juices flowing at the time, and been blessed to have Matt Brown at my side for 11 years now, that without him, we wouldn't be talking right now.
I remember doing Matt's games. That was the first time I ever called lacrosse, back in the Great Western Lacrosse League, when I think it was Denver, Notre Dame, Air Force, Ohio State, and I think there was one other program in that conference.
Bellarmine.
That's who it was, yeah. Yep. And every time I see Matt, it comes up, not every time. Him and I usually talk hockey. As you know, I'm a big hockey and lacrosse guy. And every now and then I throw that in there. He's like, thanks for making me feel old, man. But you're right, man. He's an awesome coach, and in so many ways, and great things. And to that point of hockey and lacrosse, I know you and David Carl, and before that, Jim Montgomery, you guys are in close quarters there and those things. And, we've seen growth in hockey. We're seeing growth in lacrosse. I don't think it's that far off before we see a conference out west. What's your thought on that, Bill?
Sometimes I take advantage of a forum that I might have. And so when we won the championship in 2015, you get interviewed by a lot of people. It's kind of exciting. And somebody asked, Eddie Tamanis, or one of those guys, served me up a softball and said, well, the exact same question that you just asked me. And the growth of our game on the men's side, if you really watch it, has happened in private, small private schools because, for instance, on our team, we got 52 guys with 12.6 scholarships. That means there's a lot of money coming into the coffers when it comes to tuition, room and board, and things like that. And I think all this growth at Division II and III has been directly coordinated with that. All the schools that have great club programs, it's directly correlated with that. So I made this thing of this statement of, let's not hide behind Title IX. Let's not hide behind the cost, because if you do your homework, men's lacrosse can enhance any university in the country. Most of the kids are good students. Most of the kids, they're not looking forward or trying to get $1 million contracts for, at least not now. Now in hockey they are. And and that's why you see some guys leave schools a little early for hockey, and I don't blame them. But the point being is that lacrosse can really enhance a university. The real problem is, and if you look at the growth of women's lacrosse, it's just taken off. There's way over 100 now women's teams in Division I only. And my daughter Brian, my youngest daughter, she's the head coach at Kent State. And that's a new program, and all these new programs are starting. For men's lacrosse, it becomes an issue, right? It becomes a number count issue. And we've always been supportive of Title IX. I had 2 daughters that played great sports. Brian went to Colgate and played Division I lacrosse. My daughter Courtney played basketball at Franklin and Marshall, and had a great experience. We love the fact that women can play at this level. Our Liza Kelly, our coach at Denver, is a phenomenal coach, and her kids are now in the top 10. We love all that, but it should if they eliminated football from the equation, because football is a total different animal. There's no women's sport that can equate with football, and
right.
football's a moneymaker. If they did that, then I think you'd watch it grow like this. We've had discussions with all the conferences out west. We've had discussions with, you name any conference, we've had it. When I say we, I mean the lacrosse guys.
Yes. Yeah.
SEC, the Pac-12, all these conferences, and I think they'd all like to have it, but I think we've also been our own worst enemy because, for instance, out west, these club programs do so good, and they're self-funded, so that they don't have to count in the Title IX numbers, and they don't come off the athletic department's budget. So the two things that are stopping us are budget and the numerical comparisons. If we could get rid of football, I do believe, though, with the growth of our game, that the first thing I ever learned in any business class was the term supply and demand. And there's so many kids now that are playing lacrosse in California, in Oregon, in Washington, in Michigan, that are going to put the demand on these schools. And especially with this virus, people are going to start finding out how important tuition dollars are. And if you do the math, and you got, we have like probably 20 of our kids are paying a full bit, at Denver. So if you do the math, if somebody will sit back at these schools and do the math, they'll find out that it's a net positive. Plus it brings us so much excitement to the school. The springtime, there's not a lot going on. Some of the schools have great baseball teams, and that's exciting, I guess. But to we all know, bringing lacrosse to the middle of a campus is, at Denver, we don't have football. So all the big tailgates happen in the springtime, and it's pretty cool environment,
Yeah. And, just to kind of ask you, we've seen Utah they're the furthest west team. They're a Pac-12 team. Their whole school is considered Pac-12. What's the next program do you think that could possibly be the next Division I lacrosse program out west?
Now, first of all, Coach Holden and his staff have done a great job already, and he's proven, like Coach Wilson at Air Force, like we hope we do at Denver, that kids will come out here, and there's talented people out here. There's been rumors, everybody thinks, the way I explained it to anybody in the Pac-12 who was willing to listen is that, people get worried about travel, and we have the biggest travel budget in the country because we want to play North Carolina. We want to play Duke. We want to play Ohio State. We want to play Notre Dame. We want to play, go out East and play. Right now we play Towson. And besides our Big East partners in Georgetown, Villanova, Providence, all those schools. Mm-hmm. But if you think about it, what these programs, there's a thing called the Learfield Cup or the Directors Cup, which basically is a compilation of all the athletic programs. Denver has won 11 of the last 12 Directors Cups for schools, Division I schools without football. In the Pac-12, the Directors Cup is huge. You're talking about Stanford, winning that thing a lot. And, and so my explanation to them is just get 6 of you. Get 6 of you that'll play, and you can name them, right? Play each other home and away. That's 10 games, right? 10 games. Take your spring trip to Denver. You play Denver and Air Force, or take a spring trip out east and play 3 games. That's 13 game schedule. Now you're Pac-12 champion. If you have a Pac-12 tournament, is an AQ in the NCAA championships.
Yep.
And that, I'm telling you, one of the things that happened at Denver when I got here, our admissions people were so excited for us, and they were great guys, but I'm not putting 2 and 2 together, right? And they said that you got, through this Final Four, we've been in 5 Final Fours in the last 10 years. You've given us over $4 million in promotions and media attention from out east, which is where a school like Denver or the California schools want kids from. So I think it's more of somebody could do a good thesis or a good study on the economics of this thing, the excitement of this thing and really put it together and make a good presentation. I think that, along with the supply and demand of young people in California, Oregon, Washington, Texas, Michigan, really want to play, Utah, obviously, that eventually we'll get there. It probably will be, as you're standing at my gravesite reading that gravestone, as I talked about before, but we're hoping for sooner than that.
Couple more minutes with Bill Tierney, head coach of Denver. We really appreciate you joining us here, Coach. And I know Luke wants to ask you about one of your former players who's dabbling in some other, some other things lately.
In Michigan?
What's that?
In Michigan?
No, not so much in Michigan.
Yeah, so Trevor Baptiste, can you kind of take me through, some of your favorite memories with Trevor and, what it was like, too, when he got drafted in the MLL and now he's playing in the PLL, of course?
It starts with my, who eventually became my son-in-law, Dylan Sheridan, was my assistant coach at Denver. He was, at the time, my daughter's boyfriend, now my daughter's husband, and he was coaching with us. And nobody had ever heard of the Face-Off Academy, but one of the assignments I gave Dylan was to become a face-off coach, try to become a good face-off coach. So he went to all these things, and one day he comes back to me and goes, "There's a guy." I go, "Yeah, I know. There's a lot of guys.
There's a guy.
There's a guy." And I said, "All right, tell me about him." He said, "This guy, Trevor Baptiste, nobody knows about him. He's ticketed to go to Franklin Marshall Division III school, and I'm telling you, I think he can be great." And to this day, I thank Dylan for finding me that guy. But the first call I had to make was to Coach Cavallero at Franklin and Marshall and tell him, and he said, "I don't want to hear this phone call because I know why you're calling." And I said, "Cavi, I'm sorry." Or Cavi and I go way back, and I said, "I'm sorry, but we're bringing Trevor out for a visit. But I wanted you to know from me that we were doing that." And he came out, he visited, and it all worked out. But the funny story I tell about Trevor is we had this great equipment manager named Rick Mick, who now lives in the northern peninsula of Michigan, and he was a great equipment guy. And Rick one day comes out. Must have been a cold day in the fall because the guys had their sweats on, and he said, "I'm worried about Trevor." And I said, "Well, what are you worried about?" He said, "I think something's going wrong with his girlfriend or something because he's got his phone in his pocket."
Oh boy!
All right, let me keep an eye on him. I try to watch the kids. And Trevor was one of these guys, like a place kicker in football, right?
Yeah.
He goes off on his side, so I'm not paying much attention. All of a sudden, I hear this noise, and it is a consistent noise, and it's going beep, beep, beep. And I look over, he's got a speaker set up down the far end of the field, and he's got that app on it that all these face-off guys have that beeps every 10 seconds, so he can use it as a whistle for him to make his move. So I walk over and I go, "What the hell is that?" So he explains to me. Fast forward to winning to the Duke game that year, the second game of the year. He wins 22 out of 26. And I remember looking at Dylan and I go, yeah, he is the guy,
He's the guy. Yeah.
And so the thing about Trevor is his own worst enemy, and yet it's what makes him great is that he will not accept. He thinks he should be 26 out of 26 every game, and that's what's made him great. And now you throw together this personality, this strength. He's only the 7th guy in the history of lacrosse to be a 4-time first-team All-American, and that goes a long way. And so it goes back to the 1800s, I think. But
wow.
And then you throw in this personality. Then you throw in the fact that he played in Coach Brown's CCBLL, which is our college box league now that we've started, and got a taste for that game. And, if you've played some box lacrosse and you've played some field lacrosse, the truth of the matter is box is more fun, and it's up and down. It's crazy. Even when you make a mistake, nobody knows about it because it's a 30-second shot clock. So Trevor loves this thing. And then, of course, the PLL comes and it gets into this explosive public battle with Greg Gorenlian, his master, and now the teacher, the student is teaching the master or beating the master, and he's just learned how to. He's a social media darling. He's figured this whole thing out. He's a great looking kid. He's got an infectious smile. He makes you laugh. He's one of those rare guys over my career. There have been a few, but he's one of those guys over my career when things get really crazy, and they do sometimes on my sideline, he'll pat you on the butt and say, "Coach, we got this." You're like, "Shut up, you're 18 years old," Don't tell me. But he's always had that. He's got an amazing family, and he's just very rarely do guys make it in lacrosse outside of the lacrosse world. And he'll continue to make it inside the lacrosse world for years to come because he takes care of himself, takes care of his body, and but doesn't matter. The minute this guy's out of the lacrosse world, we're going to be reading about him somewhere else.
Yeah, he's. When are you on his podcast, or have you already been on it?
I'm coming up there. We wanted to start with Brownie on that, and now it's really those podcasts are really a reaching out thing that Matt Brown has taken full bore on this for our alumni. And so Matt's a coach here, but he and Trevor are alumnus of the university, and so we're reaching out. There's been a lot of great stories and a lot of great players in our program, and so we're going to reach out to the Canizaros and the Matthews and the Bergs and all those guys. I get interviewed enough by guys like yourselves. I think it's a really cool adventure for us to do that. This guy Matt Brown he's an amazing character, man. He's got this US Box LA thing going. He's the head coach of the Canadian under-19 team. He's, I believe, the best offensive coordinator in the game. He's the associate head coach of our program. And the reality is, if people watched us day by day, he really runs our program, and he's just an amazing man with 3 daughters under the age of 9, and great wife, Jewel, who's busy with her real estate thing. And Matt is, I'm so blessed to have him, and yet so in awe of the number of things he jams into 24 hours that I know would take me 24 days, And, I'm blessed to have him, that's for sure.
Well, Trevor's going to come on with us on Monday. I don't know. As you know, again, I got a lot of ties to both sports. A good friend of mine is David Quinn, the head coach of the New York Rangers, who I was with for some time in the American Hockey League. And when Luke came over to the studio this morning, I was on the phone with Quinny, and I said, "Wait, I want to tell Luke that we're going to have you on Monday." And his face beamed, but I think he's more excited to talk to Trevor, to be honest with you. I really do. He's got
you will laugh. You will laugh. I mean, there's no person on earth. I don't know if you guys saw the picture that was taken of he and I in my office with the shades. Have you guys?
I don't think I have it.
I saw
you got to
that,
show me that.
I've seen that. Yeah.
No one on earth could have gotten me to do that other than Trevor Baptiste. This guy, he could sell snowballs to Eskimos. This guy, he's just an amazing young man, and you'll really enjoy that interview. And just let's leave any Coach T stories off the grid there, okay?
We got you, man. We got you. Well, I told Luke, I said I might just kind of step out and let him handle that one, man. He's his love for lacrosse. And before we let you go, I just want to say thanks. I think it was it'll be 3 years ago this November.
Yep.
When Luke came on a trip with me. I had a football game, I had the Army and Air Force game, and it was in late October, and you guys were practicing, and that was such a thrill for my son. Yeah. And then you said, go to Red Rocks, and what an experience that was. So that was well done, and we really appreciate that, Bill.
Well, and I appreciate it. Look, it's Luke, you're right. You got a great father. I know sometimes he's a pain in your butt, but he's a good man. And this hockey lacrosse relationship that we all have. You mentioned Jim and David, and of course George Wozdecki was a and it's such a great relationship at Denver between the two programs, and there's so many things in common, especially with the kind of the Canadian and U.S. thing. If you look at hockey, and you could tell me that better than I could tell you, Ben. It was not that long ago where people would say, "Oh, he's the only American on this team,"
Yeah.
And now the kids are coming from Arizona and playing in the pros, in Colorado, and so it's really cool. We're hoping in our sport that it's a precursor to what's going to happen in lacrosse in another 5, 10, 20 years. So enjoy it, Luke, and enjoy the old man once in a while too. Time goes fast.
We're having. I never thought I'd be doing this kind of stuff, but he's sharp and he's carrying me just like all those partners I have on CBS, right?
It's all good. And you do a great job, Ben. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I appreciate you, and thanks so much for doing this. And we'll be keeping tabs on things like everybody else. Stay safe, best to your family, and thanks again for doing this, Bill. We really truly appreciate it.
Loved it. Thanks, guys.
You bet. All right, so the legendary head coach, Bill Tierney, 7 national championships. That was a lot of fun talking to Bill. He's a great man, got a great sense of humor, and a great outlook and perspective on the great sport of lacrosse. He's been doing it a long time, and he's incredibly successful. How was that for you, young man?
It was pretty cool. It's not every day that you get to talk to a legend in coaching, especially of lacrosse, like someone like Bill Tierney. To kind of go through the history a little bit of Princeton in the 90s, something I didn't get to experience.
Right.
And then kind of understand, more how he kind of got to Denver and, talking to him too about other coaches like Dave Petramala. And,
I didn't know he recruited Dave.
Yeah, I had no idea either. No. So, it's pretty cool to hear that and know that they're, everyone in lacrosse has such a close, bond with each other, but to hear that, that they're, he even said that they're practically, like father-son with each other. It was pretty cool to hear that and, see some of his takes on things and talk to him a little bit about one of our up-and-coming guests on Monday. So
Monday, Trevor Baptiste, formerly of Denver, set the all-time NCAA record a couple of years back at the Big East tournament. Yours truly was on the call along with Evan Washburn that night. What a night that was.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. The record, though, I believe, has since been eclipsed, has it not?
I
thought Ireland caught him.
I think he caught him in percentage. I don't believe it's a total wins.
All right. Trevor's not going to be happy with me on that.
No, but we can talk to him more about that on Monday about, TD Ireland coming in if he doesn't decide
chasing his record.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that'll be pretty interesting to see, what he's got on that. We're excited to have him on Monday. So
it should be a lot of fun and a lot of great guests coming up as we move along. David Quinn, head coach of the New York Rangers, will be joining us next week. Jeff Monken, the head football coach at Army, will be joining us. Yeah. We got a lot of great guests lined up as we continue to roll along here on No Holding Back and our podcast, both on the video and audio side. For Luke, Ben, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you next time.